Hello. Let me just double check that my microphone is correct. It's been ages since I've done any kind of streaming, so I need to reacquaint myself. So yeah, this should be okay. Yeah, it looks good. It looks correct. Hello. I am going to be playing a game called Glassy Eye today, which is by Cmrn Knzlmn. This is part of his new project that he's putting out called Describe World. I'm mostly familiar with Cmrn as a podcaster, game studies academic type, but I'm a big fan of all that he's doing on the Range Touch Network. Michael Lutz and also occasionally Austin Walker. And since I was petitioning people to play my two-player game this weekend, it felt only right that I play this game by Cmrn when he was like, hey, you should play my game. And I am certainly curious to try it. So let's take a look. I've got it here in my little Miro board, and it's very short. So Glassy Eye with this low resolution picture of what I assume is a deer. A single player ecology game by Cmrn Knzlmn. And I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole thing because it's only like 4 pages long here. So, Glassy Eye is about narrating death within ecology. All things die in a context. This is a fundamental truth. This game uses random dice rolls in order to create a context that you then turn into a story about living and dying animals. Specifically, it is about telling the stories of non-human animals that live and die in context with each other and with human beings. Glassy Eye can be used in a couple of different ways. You can use it as a journaling game tool that explores your local ecological conditions. You can research specific animals and learn about what they eat, what they prey upon, or are preyed upon by, and what creatures engage with their corpses after their death. I think you can also use this game as a way of thinking about unreal ecologies of your own making. The prompts can easily be adapted to build a science fictional or fantastical food web. You would just make up the relations instead of importing ones from the world that we live in. I was prompted to make this game by my own position within ecology. Over the past few years, I have been managing a small woodland behind my house, as well as a large garden, a yard, and some additional spaces. The decisions I make in those spaces are significant. My choices to cut, prune, clear, pile, eliminate, and collect materials all trade off or benefit animal life. The labor of being outdoors and engaging with these spaces is centered on implicit and explicit ethical choices, and those choices that are bound in a context of what happened before. They are all mostly difficult, and you have to be willing to live with what you've done, even if it pushes some species out in order to invite new species in. Feral hogs, box turtles, armadillos, voles, snakes, frogs, myriad birds, deer, rabbits, foxes, coyotes, thousands of insects, great horned owls, vultures, and many other creatures live in proximity to them. We live and die together, and the context that I have made will, hopefully, outlive me. This is a game that was designed idly while doing that work. The rules of Glassy Eye. Choose a very small animal. It is preferably an insect or an animal that occupies a similar place within the food web. This is your starting animal. Write a sentence about that starting animal in its context. Write about what it eats and how it exists in the world. Roll a 6-sided die. For each roll, you should write and narrativize what happened. So I'll leave these in their full detail for when we're actually playing, but if you roll a 1, your animal perishes. If you roll a 2 or a 3, your animal encounters one or more animals of its own species. If you roll a 4 or a 5, your animal is predated on by another animal and eaten. If you roll a 6, your animal encounters a human being. You may play Glassy Eye as many times as you want, or you should only play it once. And so I assume that that last line is about how many times you go through this sequence, but maybe it's also just a broader statement. Certainly true about any game. And so here we have a very low resolution image of a turtle, I believe, and a quote, which I will read. I do not want to look elsewhere for significance, as it seems to me that everything that is of importance is or has been here. Imminence other than what takes place here seemed useless. Which is from David Lulka, The Lawn, or On Becoming a Killer. Cmrn Knzlmn, 2025, Season 1 of Describe World. So that's it. It's a very short 4-page document. One of which is the cover, and one of which is an epigraph. So really, it's like a 2-page RPG. And I'm gonna play it today. I think I'm gonna do it in this mode of building a science fictional or fantastical food web. Because I have recently played through Subnautica and Subnautica Below Zero, because a friend of mine organized a little archipelago server, which is like a randomizer kind of thing that you can play as a group. And replaying those games was cool, and especially the first one really puts an emphasis on this kind of ecology modeling stuff, and is quite compelling. So I'm going to do something in that mode, I think. And that way I won't have to go down rabbit holes of doing research and, then like somehow accidentally doxing myself while looking at Wikipedia or something. I don't know. It'll just be easier for the purposes of this stream, I think, to keep it fictional and fantastical. So that's what I'm going to do. Which I guess means that I need to start playing here. So I'm going to just type as I go. So the first thing I need to do is choose a very small animal, preferably an insect or an animal that occupies a similar place within the food web. And so I'm going to be very directly following on from Subnautica. I'm going to do like an ocean biome. And so something that is like an insect in that context could be like a little like shrimp, like krill essentially, right? Or very tiny sea bugs that feed on plankton that is equally tiny. And so let's start with something that's like a krill analog. And I guess since we're making it up, we can give it its own name. But maybe also it's fine to just do I don't know. So I read this book somewhat recently called, I think it was called To Be Read If Fortunate. It's a Becky Chambers book about xenobiologists, or geologists, biologists, etc. Like these scientists who go out and are exploring in space. And they have a bunch of guidelines that get described in this book. It's really interested in, alien ecology and stuff like that. And one of their rules, if I'm remembering this correctly, was to avoid making analogies or comparisons to Terran or Earth animals, because that has this like obscuring or flattening function within their work. And so when they were documenting things or whatever, they would describe them in these very deliberately in these ways that would deliberately avoid any shortcutting with, like being like, oh, it's like a shrimp but different or whatever, right? Because it doesn't help them meet the thing in its own context, which I think is very relevant to this game. So I'm not going to just call these things krill. I'm going to call this like microplankton eating water bugs. I'll call them water bugs. So we've got our microplankton eating water bugs. And I need to write a sentence about that starting animal in its context, write about what it eats and how it exists in the world. So maybe these are even kind of like doing a little bit of like a jellyfish thing, where they have like a, like a kind of like dome shaped thing that like pumps water in order to move around. So like tube / dome body acts as water pump, propels these tiny organisms in pursuit of microplankton on which they subsist. In the first 4 meters of the ocean. Stop. So we know what it eats and how it kind of broadly exists, right? It's within the first 4 meters of the ocean. And I think playing around with like the depth that things inhabit is going to be one dimension that is very important here. And then that these things, are eating the microplankton and they exist in the world. They propel themselves around with their little kind of water pump body, which is, things on Earth that do that, right? There are certain, jellyfish, as I cited, and then also like certain squid, I believe, do that. They have like tubular water pumpy kind of muscles that they interact with. Okay. So I'm going to roll a 6-sided die now, and I'll show you all the result. I have in Other Waters Dream Krungle. I haven't played it yet. I need to get around to that. I believe that's by the Citizen Sleeper designer, right? So I rolled a 5, which means that my animal is predated on by another animal and eaten. I'm going to write about how this happened. And then the predating animal is now my animal. So I'm just going to, for my own notation here, rolled a 5. So we could go, like on Earth you would have like a baleen whale or something, right? Like some kind of big filter thing. But I think also there are probably, I'm sure, smaller animals that eat things like krill, right? So I don't think I want to quite jump up to megafauna here. But I do like the idea of like filtering also interestingly, like plants are completely absent from this game. And I don't know, the distinction between animal and plant, I don't know how meaningful that actually is in terms of this game or in terms of like biologically or how we form that distinction. Because there are some plants that, eat animals and stuff like that. And plants have a lot more are a lot more active and agential than we traditionally give them credit for, is my understanding. But so, you know, like there could be a version of this, right, where I make up some sort of like anemone sea plant type thing that kind of passively catches and eats these, or like lures them in and eats them. But I think I want to do something that's just like a couple steps larger. Like some kind of, yeah, something that like has little filters on arms that it can like swing around to catch these guys, and then it gobbles them up. So I'm going to call it like a pinwheel filter hunter. Sweeps through, consumes the water bug, along with hundreds of others. Swims rapidly through the upper layers of the ocean. Seeking swarms of water bugs. So they plankton. Never type in front of an audience. It's always deeply embarrassing. Seeking swarms of water bugs as they feed on plankton that rises in the heat of the day. Spot is the bright daytime sky. And the pinwheels, single eye. I mean, it's a predator. It should have multiple eyes, actually. Let's give it, like, many eyes. So my thinking here is that this thing like moves very quickly, and so the swarms and clouds of water bugs aren't really able to react in time to escape it, and that it has this like spinning front like pinwheel filter thing that maybe even like has a little bit of a vortexing kind of effect as it swings through, and it sucks them in. Okay, so now I roll again. Hello, Paul. I have rolled a 6, which means that my animal encounters a human being. Roll a d6 again. If the result is even, which is not, if the result is odd, your animal survives the encounter. Write a realistic scenario in which either of these things happened. The game is over. So I believe the language for the text here is slightly ambiguous, right? It says, write a realistic scenario in which either of these things happened. I think I need to write a realistic scenario in which one of those things happened, whichever one I rolled for, right? So rolled a 6 and then a 1. So our animal is going to survive. And so this thing is this pinwheel filter hunter. Is kind of, I'm imagining, like going up through the shallows and then diving down again and then up into the shallows to catch these things, right? To use the sun and the contrast of them against the bright sky to see them. And then it goes towards the swarm, eats them, goes back down again. And so it would be very easy for like a boat to just come through this situation. So that's, I think, how a human is going to get involved here. Let's call it a skiff because I like that word. So a human-made skiff roars along the ocean's surface, creating a large wake and disturbing the water bugs. They feed on plankton. Choppy waters create a lot of visual interference. The noise is very alarming to the pinwheel hunter. The nosy. The noise. The pinwheel retreats to deeper water. Avoid what might be a large predator. Surface has no previous context for humans and boats. Right, so this is like an uncommon occurrence. It's not used to seeing boats, and so it doesn't know what the fuck that is, and it retreats into darker water to try to get away, maybe conceal itself. So we haven't talked about whether this is in like open ocean or shallows, but maybe it's in shallows. Self inside let's say a reef. Till the waters settle and its prey right, so just this brief vignette of like the boat goes through makes a bunch of noise, makes a bunch of like visual interference that makes hunting difficult, also seems threatening. And so the pinwheel hunter retreats to deeper water to avoid what might be a large predator on the surface, having no previous context for humans and boats. It conceals itself inside a reef until the waters settle and its prey becomes visible once more. So in this case, and so now the game's over, our human kind of intervention is one of disruption, and although no permanent damage in this case, it's kind of this alarming interaction. So, in theory, that is one round of the game because the game ends anytime you roll a 6, basically. And so let's start again. Let's play a second round. Which gives me an opportunity to start with a new tiny critter of some kind. We've introduced this idea of a reef as well. So maybe I want something that like is like an ocean floor thing, like a little worm. Okay, so I'm going to make a tiny worm. I write a sentence about that animal in its context. So, coral worm. Segmented. Oops. Segmented chitinous worm that filters nutrients from trying to decide if it's from sand or from the water. Let's see, it's from the water. In and around reefs. They hide in the sand. When threatened. So I'm imagining they kind of like stick their little wormy heads up and sway in the current and grab what they can. And then if anything comes along trying to eat them, they retreat down. Rapidly recoiling their bodies into the sand. Writing will be of poor quality in these cases, but I'm just gonna let the bad sentence ride and keep playing the game. I have rolled a 1. So when I roll a 1, my animal perishes. Write a few sentences about how this happened, then write about the first animal that the corpse encounters. This could be an insect, a scavenger, or some other animal. This is my new animal. Yeah. This particular worm unknowingly works its way away from the reef and starves out in the more barren seabed of the open ocean. I don't know, it's just a worm. It doesn't fucking know. It's purely it's just kind of hoping, it's playing the numbers, you know, and it doesn't work out for this one worm. very, very simple organism that doesn't have a lot of decision-making ability. Because notably with this one, right, it's your animal perishes, not your animal gets eaten, which is different. And so something now comes up and is going to consume the corpse. Right, it says this could be an insect, a scavenger, or some other animal. I think this is like a bottom-feeding creature of some kind that just like goes along the seabed and just like sifts through the sand. Some kind of, ocean vacuum cleaner. So something I'm thinking maybe like let's call it an urchin. Because I think a lot of like crabs and sea urchins do this kind of behavior. So let me just double check that I'm doing this right. So I just say what eats it. I mean, it just says what it encounters too, so it could be just that, something goes by. But I think in this case, in order for a corpse to encounter something, that thing has to interact with the corpse. So its body is crushed. I mean, more ground. All right, and so now we're going to follow this bottom-feeding filter urchin around. And I roll a 3. So my animal is going to encounter one or more animals of its own species. So I'm going to zoom in a little more here. So my animal encounters one or more animals of its own species. This encounter can take any shape that you desire. Combat, mating, competition, food gathering, or any other realistic behavior for these creatures. Then roll on the chart again. So with these, I'm not imagining them as having a ton of like sensory apparatus. So I think they kind of like bump into each other. So it bumps into another of its own species. The two probe each other with their antennae. Well, so actually first they're going to, so they both, let's say that these are kind of like turtles. They retreat under their shells in surprise. Then tentatively, Jesus, probe each other with their antennae. Once they feel safe, they emerge from their shells and each go off in separate directions. Avoiding competing with one another. So these guys, they don't waste time and energy fighting. They're just like, okay, cool. We're just not going to follow each other around or interfere with each other. And that's their kind of survival strategy, is one of like parallel non-competition, pseudo-cooperation. Just very workman-like bottom feeders. All right, so now we've got a 4. So a 4 is that my animal is predated upon by another animal and eaten. So we've got this thing with like a shell and a grindy mouth that kind of goes along the bottom, basically just processing sand and any kind of junk that's in it, pretty indiscriminately. We know that they're very like cautious. They retreat into their shells, and so I think this thing is going to get killed by something that can flip it and manipulate it. That has like either tentacles or hands or something. So yeah. As it is carrying on, filtering through sand below the reef. Some kind of like eel with little tentacles. A snake-like predator with prehensile tentacles approaches it, uses its tentacles to flip the bottom feeder over, stranding it. Then uses its sharp teeth and narrow head to reach into the bottom feeder's shell and devour it from the inside. Pretty ghastly stuff. The reef snake then lurks inside the now empty shell as a way of concealing itself. So it sort of leverages something else's shell as a temporary kind of safe haven of both concealment and, you know, the shell still works as a shell. All right, I have rolled a 5. So now maybe something bigger comes along. So we've got this sort of like snake-like thing, which I'm kind of imagining as having like, it's got like its head with the teeth, and then kind of below or around and behind the head, it has like a little ring where the tentacles come out, and those are its little manipulators. And then when it's swimming along, they kind of flow in line with its body, so that it stays hydrodynamically, you know, smooth and good. But it's probably not that fast. And maybe something that is like fast and has a lot of teeth at the front is what gets this thing. You know, something kind of like a seal or whatever. Oh, actually, yeah, and maybe it's something that like isn't under the water all the time, but dives underneath. Despite its efforts to hide and be safe in the shell, the sea snake is caught by a larger, faster predator that dives into the reef from the surface, seeking anything. I mean, let's just leave it at that. It dives into the reef from the surface. It's a large diving predator. Relies on speed and its approach from above to catch prey unawares. It grabs the sea snake as it emerges from the husk to stalk new prey. Let's have it be some kind of like big bird. It catches the sea snake, in its beak and surges up out of the water to swallow it whole and return to its nest. Yeah, you gotta watch out for Big Bird. Oh my god, how do I interact with this text box? Put that elsewhere. Okay. So I keep rolling. I just got a 5. I don't want to keep rolling 5. I'm going to re-roll. I'd like a little more variety here. So I got a 3. So I rolled a 3, which means my animal encounters one or more animals of its own species. This encounter can take any shape that I desire. combat, mating, competition, food gathering, or any other realistic behavior for these creatures. I think it's going to be that it returns to its nest where it has its young, and it's going to feed them. The great seabird returns to its... let's call it the great diving predator. Returns to its nest on a rock, juts out of the waters of the reef. Below the rock is ringed with plants and coral networks. Should be a comma here. Below, the rock is ringed with plants and coral networks that make it difficult for large sea predators to approach. Right, so nothing can just kind of pop out of the water and eat the babies. The diver alights in its nest and excretes a nutritious sludge onto the eggs. No, they're not eggs still. I think they are just babies. Onto its babies. They lick themselves and each other with big gross tongues to eat. They're not tongues, they're radula, actually. I always forget to put a space between that. I believe that's how you pluralize radula. Spell checker doesn't like it, but you know what? I'm going with it. So yeah, it just kind of like it's already chewed the thing into like a sludge, and it just barfs it onto the babies, and then they lick each other off. It's very gross. Make low cries as their parent spreads its wings, takes to the sky again to seek more prey. Because yeah, I feel like when animals are in this mode of like feeding their young, they basically just are constantly going and getting food, and even spending all of their waking time engaged in that, they still can like fall short. It's pretty harrowing and bleak, let's say. I'm gonna just take my first run. I'm gonna put it over on the other side here. I'm just gonna rearrange things a little bit so that I can stay close to my table here. I got a 4. I think this is going to be my last round because I want to talk about the game, and also I feel like I'm kind of just stuck in RNG purgatory here. So my animal is predated upon by another animal. So it's going to eat the big diving predator. which I'm imagining having a bit of like a comic book pterodactyl kind of energy. I think maybe like a so like while the diving predator is in the water pursuing another sea snake, it gets entangled by, trying to think of something almost like, not exactly like, I mean, maybe, yeah. So it gets entangled by a loose net of kelp. A many-limbed... Really? You don't like limbed? Okay, whatever. Whatever, spell check. I should hyphenate this, though. Many-limbed predator emerges from beneath a large rock, crawls along the net to its prey. Wraps itself around the great diver and holds it under the water till it drowns. Then deftly untangles it from net and drags it below to eat in its lair under the rock. Yeah, and I think with that horrifying image of this like net weaving, like sort of pseudo octopus thing, it's going to be the end of my second run of the game. Let's just pretend. I mean, it's meant to end with human interaction, but I'm running out of steam because I want to talk about the game now. I think it's neat. I think for a pretty simple kind of core mechanic, it's doing some good stuff. And I've had a good time playing it, as you all have witnessed. Yeah, so obviously there is a problem that the game only ends when you roll a 6, and in theory that just might never happen. It can mean that your game is either, like you roll the die twice, or you roll the die, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I rolled 6 times and could have, in theory kept going. I mean, I'm not saying this is any kind of like heavy criticism or whatever. Like, I think it's, it's fine, but it is subject to that randomness. There isn't like a quick and easy way to solve that while keeping the game as kind of compact and lean as it is. And I do like that the way that it is meant to end is with your animal encounter as a human being. I mean, I can just... Here's the thing, right? With any game like this, I'm just supposed to roll the dice forever, and I'm trapped by the game, and I'm a human being who cannot make a decision for themselves and just end the game. Like, no, obviously I can just declare that I roll a 6 and end, or I can just stop, right? So, like, it's not a huge problem. And yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting that the game has this kind of, it can have a very abrupt and sudden termination, which I think is a thing that the game is doing on purpose, and I think is very interesting. So it was just a little awkward in my second run that it went a bit longer than I would have liked it to. And so, yeah, I think if I had like a real criticism of it, it would be the absence of plant life within this, because I think plants create such important context for animal life, and at the very baseline, you know, animals somewhere have to eat plants so that then other animals can eat them. You know, like all life within our own, you know, in the real world is kind of founded on at the most basic level, things eating plants, which eat, you know, sunlight, right? So, I think I would have liked to see plants involved in here somewhere. Whether that's, I mean, you're probably going to get it in your first thing, right? Like in this, choose a very small animal. It is preferably an insect or a small animal an insect or an animal that occupies a similar place within the food web. You know, a lot of those are going to be plant eating. You know, like aphids, ants, caterpillars, bees, you know, on and on. But it's kind of implicit at the moment, and I think having a little bit more of explicit connection to plant life would have been interesting. You know, it could have even been worked into one of these things that you roll, or, you know, nodded to somewhere, because it gets, you know, like Cameron talks about plants almost like primarily in terms of describing his interaction with the context that these animals live within. And obviously, like, I brought in plants for my things over like coral and kelp and some of this other stuff. Like, it was a factor, but it wasn't. The game kind of relied on you bringing that in or having it be emergent from, you know, if I were referencing real, you know, earth animals and ecology and stuff like that, you know, those plants would have maybe pretty naturally inserted themselves in that way. But I wonder about that, and I wonder if it's a genuine gap. But yeah, I really do I like this writing on the first page, particularly his reflection here in this like last big paragraph, about, you know, reflecting on his own position within ecology, and about how he's been managing this like woodland behind his house, as well as gardening, and the ways in which human intervention into that stuff has these knock-on effects that impact animals. Right? Like, it's clear that this game lives up to this pitch most significantly, I think, in this number 6 here, right? If your animal encounters a human being, does it die at the hands of the human, or it survives? Right? This idea of like intervention into this bigger network of animal kind of interdependency, and the way that human intervention can be so absolute, right? Like it ends the game. And it ends the game either way, right? Whether the animal dies as a result of human intervention or not. And so there's like this statement that the game is making about the kind of disruptive nature of interactions between humans and the animal world, which, like I think at the very least we need to be very conscious of and reflect on those things. Like animals end each other's lives all the time. Nature, quote unquote, a is just full of like death and predation and you know animals dying for all kinds of reasons. Where they like can't get enough food or you know it just doesn't always work out great for animals, and a lot of animals subsist on eating other animals, including humans end up doing a lot of that too. But there is human beings have the capacity for larger scale and less survival oriented interventions into the world of other creatures, and we should really think about that more. And like, I don't know, I think Cameron does a good job of not being like censorious or scolding in how he talks about this. He's just trying to create this thing that like puts you in a position to think about it, and to think whatever you're gonna think. And I think it pushes you a bit towards certain outcomes, but it is not it's not heavy handed about it. I think it's pretty nice and reserved or restrained with how it does that. So yeah, I think like some of these gaps in it that I'm noticing are really about driving towards a particular outcome or a particular relationship or a particular like set of things that you're meant to be thinking about when playing the game. But yeah, I enjoyed doing it. It was nice to have this as a companion piece to playing Subnautica, or replaying, I should say, Subnautica, a game which is all about forming relationships with an ecology, and making certain interventions into it, among other things. But yeah, cool game. Folks should play it. I think it would definitely be really fun also to play it in the mode of using real animals and just like having Wikipedia open, and following those threads when you look at like an actual animal. Look at what its actual predators are when it gets eaten by a predator. Look at, are those animals territorial? Do they fight each other? What are their mating practices? What kind of food do they eat? Right? Like, to answer all of these questions with like real world explicit things. Because this is a very good way to get to know a certain kind of pocket of ecology and a certain context of ecology. Whether you want to learn about your local things in your local environment or somewhere else, right? Like, we have a lot of tools available to make this a kind of interesting procedural walk through a certain portion of an environment, and then also to, in doing all that, think about human interventions into that. Not very recently at this point, but I did revisit a book called Hummingbird Salamander with some buddies in a book club. And, that's a book that gets you thinking about what human beings owe to animals and the the environment in general. Good old Jeff Vandermeer, who was very concerned with those things, and I think any of his books, you could pick one and it would feel relevant to a game like this. So yeah, I had a lovely time, and I actually followed through and played a solo game in a semi-solo mode, which is the only way I would ever be accountable enough to myself to do it. So yeah, you should go check it out. It's part of Cameron's Describe World project. So, you can follow this link, cmrn.knzlmn.com. And he's got some like blog posts and some other things relating to it, as well as like a podcast, I believe, which I haven't listened to yet because it's long. But at minimum, you could play this game. And it was worth my time to do so. So thank you all for coming along with me. I'll catch you later.